Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
OOIDA's Lewie Pugh told federal lawmakers Wednesday that they need to start listening to truckers regarding regulations. We'll have a full breakdown of his testimony. We'll also have more detail about the hearing and the regulations covered, as well as some analysis from OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs Jay Grimes. I'll discuss avoiding trouble with brokers with Tom Crowley and Aron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. And finally, Scott Thompson discusses states tackling the autonomous truck issue with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We'll spend a little time on Capitol Hill today, recapping OOIDA Executive Vice President Lewie Pugh's testimony before the House Highways and Transit Subcommittee on Wednesday. The hearing was titled Examining the Department of Transportation's Regulatory and Administrative Agenda, with lawmakers asking questions meant to examine DOT policies and its actions. Pugh painted a picture of what he called a dysfunctional regulatory environment.
Trucking is one of the most heavily regulated industries in America. From the number of hours you can drive, to the color and width of tape that you must put on your trailer, to even when you can go home, every element of trucking is controlled by regulation. Complying with existing regulations, many of which have no connection to safety, can be overwhelming, and even for the most experienced drivers, and in some cases it's damn near impossible.
Citing the current pursuit at DOT to mandate speed limiters and even maybe side underride guards, Pugh said truck drivers are completely frustrated with the department's regulatory actions. The result, OOIDA says, is that safe and experienced truckers are being pushed out of the industry, but Pugh suggested a solution.
It's time for Congress and DOT to help make trucking an appealing, safe, and sustainable career by listening to the people who make their living behind the wheel.
And lawmakers did listen to Pugh throughout Wednesday's hearing. He fielded the majority of questions on the panel of four. A recurring theme throughout, the tendency to look toward technology, much of it unproven, to address safety concerns. Speed limiters are a prime example of that. Multiple lawmakers raised questions about the proposed mandate out of FMCSA, many expressing opposition. Pugh told them a mandate is likely to have the opposite intended effect for several reasons. For one, Pugh says they'll feel like they're being forced to make up time.
Truckers already are way under pressure with hours of service because they're regulated, of course, by the amount of time they can drive and the amount of time they're supposed to take a break. So if you add speed limiters into this, and of course drivers are paid by piecework, so when you add speed limiters in this, it's just putting more pressure on drivers. It's also been proven that inexperienced drivers and newer drivers feel this pressure and oftentimes speed in places that they probably shouldn't be speeding, two-lane roads and construction and stuff like that.
And in this exchange with Congressman Troy Nehls of Texas, Pugh pointed out that forcing semis to move slower than traffic will increase interactions on roadways.
And what does the safety data tell us about the risk for crashes when you have trucks that are, now we're forcing them to travel below the posted speed limit or slower than the flow of traffic? What does the data say?
There's plenty of data out there to show, but if there's a 10 mile per hour differential in speeds between traffic, that creates 227% more interactions between cars and trucks,
Sure.
Which interactions is where we have accidents.
Mm-hmm. Aside from the safety concerns related, what does this do to our nation's supply chains? How would that affect it?
What's going to slow our supply chain down? It's actually going to have a reverse effect with congestion because we're going to need more trucks to haul the same amount of freight that we're hauling now. Yeah. And with that being said, it's going to put more trucks on the highway, which will be traveling 10 mile per hour below the speed limit or more in different sectors, which will again cause more congestion and more accidents.
Speaking of accidents, Pugh worries we'll see more involving semis if the USDOT's automatic emergency braking mandate goes into effect. FMCSA and NHTSA have issued a joint proposal that would require AEB systems and electronic stability control systems on new vehicles weighing more than 10,000 pounds. A final rule is now projected for January. In response to a question from Congressman Doug LaMalfa of California, Pugh explained his concerns with regard to false activations and taking control away from a trained driver.
Yes, in short, it'll put you into a skid if you're not real careful or don't know what you're doing. That's where I point out the fact, as I said earlier, cars are much different than trucks. Trucks way longer. It's 65, 70 feet long. The tires are bigger, where the wheels, the tires are at on the road at the time. Then you add in the different kinds of loads. If you're hauling a low load or a piece of some pipe or something, it doesn't stick very high on your trailer. You have a lower center of gravity. That handles completely different if you're hiring a giant single coil that weighs 50,000 pounds and 6 feet tall, but only 4 feet wide. You're very high center of gravity. It's easy to tip. Put liquid into the mix. If you pull a tanker, I pulled a tanker for a little bit. I jokingly said it felt like you're on a boat all the time because as you're going down the highway, that stuff's in there sloshing. Now you're on an icy road and you hit the brakes or they automatically just lock up and that chemical or something that's in that tanker comes forward, it's going to put you in a heck of a situation.
The EPA's new emission standards for heavy trucks also came up numerous times during Wednesday's hearing. Pugh said the new rules, which will require a quarter of new sleeper cab tractors to be zero direct emission vehicles by the year 2032, are going to devastate the industry. He cited the lack of charging infrastructure and said the added weight will lead to lower payloads, which in turn will lead to more trucks on the road. His overarching message throughout was that the EPA is pushing technology that isn't ready for a mass rollout.
The American trucker is getting a little tired of it too, just like the American consumer. They're tired of being the guinea pigs for all this stuff that comes out of EPA. We were the guinea pigs in 2008, we were the guinea pigs in 2011, and we're going to be the guinea pigs again. And what's happened every time we've been a guinea pig is a whole sector of our industry got wiped out because they couldn't afford this, either couldn't afford it, or once they got it, it didn't work like it was supposed to, and they couldn't afford the maintenance to maintain it and to keep these kind of trucks on the road. Truckers want clean air. We all want clean air and clean water. But let's let the free market figure this out. Free market always does better than government heavy-handedness.
Pugh said he believes there's too much focus on technology right now, too much of a push toward technology, when the focus should really be on driver training.
In my opinion, as a trained trucker, and this is what we should be looking at, is training truckers instead of coming out with all kinds of electronic devices to dumb down the industry. Let's train the people behind the wheel to drive the truck. I hauled frac sand for a long time down West Virginia in the mountains. You have to know what you're doing to drive off-road and go up the side of a mountain. I mean, I was pulled up the side of a mountain with a dozer. It was so steep. You can't make computers, in my opinion, that can do these kind of things. And you know what? We all forget, and you said it yourself, Congressman, computers have bad days too. I can't get my freaking phone to sync to my 2022 Ford pickup truck half the time. Now, I think that's pretty basic technology, but it doesn't work a lot. But now we want to put all these things into trucks and say, hey, you're safer now.
Threaded in throughout Pugh's testimony was that plea he made during his opening statement, asking lawmakers and regulators to listen to truck drivers, and it continued through to the end of the hearing, with Pugh taking the final question of the day and saying this.
I think my drivers would like to start seeing common sense regulation that's coming from experienced truckers, and instead of making regulations on a false, fake driver shortage narrative, which we've seen over and over and over, that's where this electronic stuff is, because we keep saying we have this driver shortage that we don't have. We have a training shortage, we have a parking shortage, we have a pay shortage. We don't have no driver shortage. So let's keep people in this industry. Let's listen to the people who do the job.
For Landline Now, I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. A quick notice. WTRF-TV is reporting a significant rockfall on Ohio Route 7 in Mingo Junction, about an hour west of Pittsburgh, that has closed the road. The closure is expected to last through tomorrow morning. Traffic is being detoured onto a route that follows US 22 and Ohio Route 151. Next, I'll get more information about that House hearing from OOIDA's Jay Grimes. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
ULSD is hurting your engine. Fight back with Howe's Diesel Defender. Get the most powerful cleaning and maximum lubricity to protect and extend the life of your entire system at a guaranteed increase in fuel economy, and you can't go wrong with Howe's.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget accuracy when your truck on a CAT scale.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Earlier this week, the House Highway Subcommittee met to discuss the U.S. Department of Transportation's regulations. And of course, trucking regulations are a big part of that picture. Here to fill us in on what happened and why it matters is OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Good to be with you.
Well, glad to have you here. And boy, did they go at the trucking regulations at this thing. I mean, isn't it unusual, even at a hearing like this, to have this many trucking topics come up at a congressional committee?
In some ways, certainly a little more so on this hearing because we only had, one real trucking-specific witness, and that, of course, was OOIDA Executive Vice President Lewie Pugh. Also had representatives from the steel manufacturing industry, representatives from the road and transportation builders, and then a representative from an advocacy group called Transportation for America. But not a big surprise considering some of the misguided regulations we see being proposed from DOT. Certainly some of the mandates that have been put on DOT from Congress, some better than others. And of course, we all know the trucking industry has no shortage of regulations and rulemaking. So always a lot to talk about, and certainly an opportunity for Mr. Pugh to educate lawmakers and sort of kind of give his perspective on what's working and really, unfortunately, more so what's not working.
Well, let's kind of take these one issue at a time, and we won't have time to get to all of these. There's just too many things that they talked about. But I'd like to start with one of the hot issues right now, which is speed limiters. And Congressman Nels brought the topic up. I'm wondering if you could tell us what he said and kind of where the conversation went from there.
Yeah, Congressman Troy Nels from Texas, who has been a staunch advocate for small business trucking. He's introduced legislation to provide restroom access on a federal level for all truckers, and certainly has raised some concerns about quite a few DOT regulations. But he brought up this proposed speed limiter mandate, which FMCSA, after initially proposing it back in 2016, kind of put that on the back burner for a few years, and then out of nowhere in 2022, reopened a potential mandate. And fortunately, we've continued to see it be delayed. Saw close to 16,000 truckers voiced their opposition when that comment period was open. But, Congressman Nels, said he wanted to remind his colleagues that DOT is considering limiting every single truck on the road to 60 miles an hour, regardless of what the posted speed limit is. And that's kind of been one of our concerns with this rulemaking. It really kind of, I think, misguidedly, unfortunately, disregards this ability by states to set their own speed limit. So you could have a federal speed limit for trucks that works in complete opposition to what states have proposed in their individual regions. So that was mentioned by Mr. Nels. Certainly the impacts on safety, creating speed differentials. And, Lewie again made the point that a speed differential as much as 10 miles an hour, which is at least what you're going to get if a speed limiter mandate for trucks is finalized, creates as much as a 227% increase in crashes between cars and trucks, and the occurrences they would have. And then not to mention putting small businesses at an economic disadvantage as well. So pretty much across the board, any way you look at it, the speed limiter mandate's going to have detrimental safety impacts, economic impacts, supply chain impacts, all of which were mentioned by a few members at the hearing earlier this week. We're continuing to support legislation that would prevent FMCSA from advancing any speed limiter mandate, and welcome the recent news that we heard earlier this month that DOT made it official that they were not planning to move forward with any phase of the rulemaking until May of 2025. So seems like the delays continue in advancing that, and certainly an opportunity for us to explain to lawmakers why it's not a good idea.
Now, another big hot-button issue that did come up at this hearing is the whole field of broker issues, yes. Broker transparency, broker fraud, and the problems that are happening in the industry right now. And Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's the top Democrat on the committee, did bring up the topic, but she seemed mostly interested in just one aspect of the whole field of broker problems. What was she focused on?
Certainly this escalation issue of freight fraud and broker fraud. And she has recently introduced a bill, H.R. 8505, that would crack down on some of the registration requirements for brokers and freight forwarders that are overdue. It would also provide FMCSA with some more legislative teeth to enforce civil penalties on fraudulent actors and unscrupulous activity. And we saw in a report from FMCSA this week that court rulings have kind of taken away some of their ability to carry out and execute enforcement action on knowing bad actors. They kind of cited that as a reason why we've seen this escalation in fraud. It kind of puts out a lot of, I think, what truckers have been aware of for years, that no one is really prioritizing, enforcement and penalties against some of these scam artists. And that, is encouraging them to stay in trucking and target truckers when it comes to some of this fraudulent activity. The legislation introduced by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton would, ensure that anyone registering for authority, not just motor carriers, but brokers and freight forwarders as well, that they have a valid physical address before they can get registration. And that really pinpoints some of these fraudulent entities that have a fake P.O. box, or there's one entity that has thousands of entities that have the same address that they're using to register. There's no vetting of the addresses, no vetting of these entities as valid brokers, and we've seen the impacts of that in the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that it's costing the trucking industry each year, especially harmful for small businesses who can have a tough time really spotting. Some of these operations are so sophisticated, it's almost impossible to determine if they're fraudulent or not.
Okay. Congressman Keene had some questions about another issue here, a requirement for automatic emergency braking, which we've talked about before on the program. And I'm curious, what about that issue interested the congressman?
Yeah, he specifically brought up the lack of consultation with drivers in the development of the rulemaking to this point. And the AEB mandate was another topic that was brought up by a few different members of Congress. And this is sort of an interesting one because Congress did, in fact, require DOT, NHTSA, FMCSA to undergo a rulemaking process that is eventually going to require all newly manufactured trucks to be equipped with automatic emergency braking systems. But in that legislation, they also require the agencies to conduct feedback and consultation with drivers who have had AEB experience to kind of better inform the rulemaking, make sure that when the mandate goes into effect that it has gone through the proper research, testing, and is going to work the way it's intended. And we saw last year NHTSA put out kind of the first step in the rulemaking process, a notice of proposed rulemaking that they published without ever doing the proper background consultation with drivers. Congressman Keene wanted to make sure that got out there, and I think Lewie acknowledged that NHTSA, rather than meeting with trucking industry representatives, meeting with drivers before they put out this rulemaking, kind of relied on the public comment period to inform them on some of these experiences that drivers have had, most notably false activation alerts. And I think because of that, we've seen another delay in that AEB rulemaking. The final rule was expected to come out in April of this year, but I think due to some of the shortcomings and flaws that were in the proposal, NHTSA, again, has recently said it's not going to be out till January of 2025 at the earliest. So a whole lot of work to go on that rulemaking, in large part due to the lack of consultation with drivers that was required by Congress as part of the rulemaking process.
Okay. I want to move on to at least one other issue here in the time we have left, and it's another big one. This is determining who's an employee versus who is an independent contractor, the issue of misclassification. Yep. Including a Department of Labor rule on independent contractors that's kind of stirred a lot of people up. I believe it was Congressman Menendez who asked about that. What were his concerns with that issue? Yeah,
he has, based on some of his statements and past hearings, he has been a champion for eliminating this notion of misclassification where, either employees or independent contractors are misclassified as employees or vice versa, and really puts the worker in a tough situation, whether that's labor protections, being paid fairly for all their time. And he brought up this the most recent Department of Labor independent contractor rule, and this is a rulemaking that's gone back and forth throughout the years and certainly has created a whole lot of confusion, not only with the Department of Labor, the trucking industry, but I think, as we heard today, Congress as well. But the most recent version of the rule kind of reinstates historical precedent, a 6-factor test looking at all aspects of a worker's job and really taking those aspects independently and trying to determine if they're an independent contractor or an employee. We think the latest rule is going to protect independent contractors generally, and if you haven't had any problems being classified as an independent contractor, if you want to be an independent contractor, that's going to protect you. There's been some concern that the latest rule is far-reaching and is going to make every independent contractor throughout a whole host of different industries automatically an employee. We don't think that is the case. I think Congressman Menendez wanted to hear from a representative of small business trucking to kind of clarify some of the confusion that's been out there. I think Lewie did that and really reiterated some of the protections that this newest rule is going to create in terms of looking at what's going to merit an independent contractor versus an employee.
About a minute and a half left, Jay. One of the issues kind of linked to that is OOIDA for some time has called for eliminating the exemption for truckers in the Fair Labor Standards Act so that they could be paid overtime. And this, of course, would apply primarily to company drivers. Did Lewie get a chance to make that point or to get that issue across to the members of the committee?
Yeah, that was one of the other points, kind of in the general regulatory environment, and this outdated motor carrier exemption is a little frustrating because it is, in fact, legislation that dates back to the 1930s that really prevents drivers from being paid for the overtime work that they do. I think it was important to kind of make sure that Congress knows that needs to change, and we've supported legislation to do just that. Certainly has an impact across a whole host of regulations, including detention time, misclassification, among others, but would really go a long way into making sure drivers are paid fairly and equitably.
Okay, well, we're out of time, Jay, but thank you very much for the information. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Less weight, more freight. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Landline Now, welcome back. Recently, we discussed filing on a broker bond, which is something hopefully you never have to do. But the old expression says that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So here to talk about preventing these kinds of problems in the first place, along with some other broker-related topics, are Tom Crowley and Aron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks as always, Mark.
So we talked about filing on these broker bonds, and it is kind of a difficult process, but it can be done. People have to do it if they haul a load for a broker and they don't get paid. That's their option. But what are some of the ways you can avoid this problem in the first place?
Well, there's a few things that you have at your disposal, right? Some people have factoring companies, although I'm not a huge advocate of factoring companies. They have a credit check on most of them that you can actually go and check and make sure, or the factoring company tell you that if they're factorable or not in the first place. So that's one way or method that you can check. The Safer website is probably the main thing that I would utilize or tell someone to use. The L&I section, the licensing and insurance, you're able to see if they have an active insurance policy, which is their bond, and you're able to see when they have their authority or when they garnered their authority, how long they've been in business, whether it's been 3 months, 6 months, or 10 years.
Hey,
And
let me say real quick, if they've been in business less than a year, stay away from them. I mean, all the scams that we see, 99% of them involve brokers that have been around 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and it does not take that much to set up a brokerage.
It does not. It's very easy to do and very little money involved, and that's the big scam. But I just wanted to throw that in.
Well, and there's not a huge upstart, like you were saying, to a creating a brokerage in the first place. So, yeah, that's where you are seeing a lot of that. You know, anyone that's been in business less than a year, kind of the way we see it, or the way we've been seeing it, is that, you know, you start up a company, you've been in business 2, 3, 4 months, you run up a sky-high bill, whether it's, you know, $800,000 or $500,000, and at the end of the day, the bond only covers $75,000, right? And so once you file this claim, which at the end of the day, it's an insurance claim, right? And you essentially you get paid pennies on the dollar, like we've talked about in the past. And a lot of times when they kind of cancel their insurance or run up that bill, they just cancel that authority. And who knows, most of these people are probably opening up multiple brokerages, especially over the last couple of years, whether it's overseas or whether the physical addresses aren't really physical addresses, they're actual virtual offices or whatnot. You know, that's not checked either. So that's a big issue in regards to that too, you know?
Yeah. And you know, a lot of these places, I mean, the fly-by-nights, the scammers, I mean, you know, there some of them are really pretty easy to see. I mean, you can tell by their email addresses if they're using a Gmail
or a Yahoo Mail
or a Yahoo Mail, something very common that anybody can grab. You know, the bigger brokers, the real brokers, they have domain names, you know, at
whatever.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways. You know, so look at that. Look at the phone numbers. A lot of the times they will set up as a motor carrier to take loads from a broker and then double broker or rebroker that stuff out, and they'll make it look more appealing than what it should. You know, they'll have a load that normally would have paid, you know, in today's freight market, which is pathetic, but, you know, maybe it paid $1,000. Well, they'll make it look like it's going to pay $1,800, and somebody will they'll say, man, I want to snag that one real quick before somebody else gets it. And that's all part of enticing you in, creating that sense of urgency. As any used car salesman will tell you, it's that sense of urgency. You need it right now, and we got to hurry up and get this done. That sense of urgency that gets people moving and makes them forget or not use some of the common sense stuff that they truly know, but that used car salesman kind of gets them to forget at that time. There's a lot of other ways too. I tell people, verify phone numbers. Go on the FMCSA's website, pull the phone number off of there, and verify that with the number that called you. If a lot of folks want to post their truck on a load board, you put yourself out there for every scammer there is. If you post your truck out there, and more, the load boards, the big load boards, that's where a lot of the scams start at. Because the brokers or fake brokers are able to get on there and post loads as real brokers, and people say, well, only use your trusted load boards. Nobody's to be trusted nowadays. If you can't verify it, don't do it.
There's an old expression in editing that I remember, and everyone that does that for a living I know has heard some version of this. It doesn't matter if your mother says she loves you, you still check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and check, and like Tom briefly hinted on it earlier, call these people. Verify the phone numbers. And if you have the capacity, there's FaceTime nowadays. You need to see the actual person. I know a lot of people don't think about that, but that is a tool that you can utilize that's at your disposal. Verify. It's almost as important nowadays as reading what's in the contract, anymore.
And carriers know there are so many vetting services out there that will vet the carrier, that the brokers use to vet the carriers. There's virtually none out there for the carrier to vet the broker, which we've spoke to some of these places, these different vetting services, and the one thing that struck me with all of them is they offered nothing to the carrier. The carrier was a captive audience that they just assumed they already had. Their offers were to the broker. Hey, for the brokers, we'll vet the carriers. We'll give you this. We'll do that. That's the thing. There's virtually nothing out there for the carrier to vet the broker.
Well, and something else about those services that you've said before, Tom, is a lot of them are essentially just serving as a blacklist, and brokers that are just pissed off at you can put a report on there, and it's, as I recall, you said it's damn near impossible for you to get that removed if it's not true.
Yeah. There's one of those services out there that will take any broker that uses their services, anything they say unverified, and post it for other brokers to see. And we get calls every day from carriers saying, hey, I can't get a load. Nobody will load me because of this. And this is not the way it happened. The broker was, not upfront with me. So I ended up saying, I can't haul that load now that I find out all the details. And now they put me as I dropped a load on them, or so they can put anything down in there, and it really hurts these small carriers. And let me say this to the brokers, that if there's any brokers listening to us, maybe one or two, there are decent brokers out there. Don't get me wrong. But to the brokers, you will need these carriers. I know today freight volumes are a little soft, and the carriers, there's plenty of carriers out there, plenty of capacity. But that will not always be the case. You will need these small carriers. And screw them as you may today, you're going to need them, and you better think about that.
I want to go back, Aron, to something that you said earlier. You talked about the fact that factoring services often offer a credit check. But there's something else we've discussed before, which is people that think, well, I'm factoring, so the factoring company will just pay me and then I'll be fine, and they'll go collect this money from the broker, and that just doesn't work, does it?
A lot of times that's not, unless you have a really nice factoring service, that's not applicable in your situation. In the contract, they don't go after the broker. That's not part of the deal. So a lot of times it's left in your court, right? And so you have to do your research up front so that doesn't happen on the back end. Because the factoring service will always pay you, for the most part that I'm aware of, up front. But there's certain measures that they have protecting them because they are essentially the middleman, and they won't take a loss on your behalf. That's not what they're getting paid for. And so they have certain contingencies. I mean, they rip it out of your bank account. I've had calls on that. They have a form of an escrow or maintenance account, as far as that goes, or loads that you have that you've done the last couple weeks. If they haven't gotten paid in 60 days or 90 days or something like that, they'll take out percentages of the incoming loads that you're supposed to be getting to compensate for that. So they definitely have contingencies. You also need to make sure you have contingencies, and what those are is the verification process.
Yeah, definitely verify. And your factoring company, I mean, there are some decent factoring companies out there and that will do your billing, essentially do your billing for you. And people look for that, but they don't necessarily do that hard collections. They won't necessarily file on a bond for you.
And they may make a phone call on your behalf, but they're not going to get in the weeds and try to, like Tom was saying, be a collector simultaneously, because that would cost extra.
Yeah, and let me say, the factoring companies, they don't generally lose money. They are protected, like Aron was saying. They have protected themselves. Even the non-recourse factors, there is non-recourse it's a funny thing because it's non-recourse right up until the time that they come back and take that money back from you. Well, then it's recourse, and they're not going to lose money. There are very few situations where it's actually non-recourse.
Absolutely. And, there's another thing here that people need to remember, and it applies to a lot of different parts of this. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yes. How many times I've had somebody call me up and they say, "Man, I found this load. It was going to make my money right. It was going to pull me out of the hole, man." And then it ends up being a scam. They jumped into it without doing their due diligence because they wanted to grab it before somebody else got it, and they ended up spending time, money, fuel, wear and tear, and they got nothing from it.
It's probably better if to spend the time checking it out. It's better to maybe miss a load occasionally because you're checking it out than to get scammed.
Yes. Yeah, because, to miss a load, okay, you didn't get the load, you didn't spend on that load, but to get scammed when you paid your driver, you've paid the fuel cost, you paid the insurance, you've already paid all this stuff, and now you don't get paid. That's not just a loss, but that's a big loss.
Yeah. Well, guys, we've got a little bit of time left here. Is there anything else that we can offer people in terms of advice about how to avoid these broker problems in the first place? Any other methods or things to check out or things to try?
Well, the one thing that I have noticed lately is a lot of the Google reviews on brokers and shippers. That's something good to check. Just anywhere that you can go and get other folks because this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't just happen to only one carrier. It happens, across the board to multiple carriers. And if you can find a source where you can get information from other carriers and learn from other people's mistakes and maybe avoid a couple of those pitfalls yourself.
Well, and then you mentioned the Google reviews. Whatever your experience is, good or bad, go ahead and put a Google review in there.
Absolutely. Especially even other things. You end up where your trailer is being held up by a shipper or something. Put a review in there on that shipper or that receiver. Let other people know. Information is our biggest resource.
Okay. Well, guys, we're out of time, but I want to thank you very much for all the information.
Good to be here, Mark.
Thank you as always.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Aron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. And folks, if you're experiencing some of these problems, if you have a question, if you need advice, call the Compliance Department at 816-229-5791. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine ViberTech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with ViberTech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to Landline Now and another installment of our state legislative update, where we take a trip around the country to check in and see how states might be making changes that could affect you out on the road. Today, we're talking autonomous trucks in primary elections, and the person we're talking to about all of these things, as always, Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine. Good to see you, Keith. How we doing?
Scott, doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Let's start with a topic we have been talking about a lot in recent months, and no doubt we'll be talking a lot about for years to come, autonomous trucks and putting protections in place to make sure they're safe in particular. We've got a few states to talk about today. And we're going to start with California, which really has been kind of a front runner, I think, on this issue, although there has been some pushback there in the state. But they're trying it again, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, of course, on this topic, autonomous trucks, California, seems like we talk about it regularly, at least in the past couple of years, and I guess that's good. I mean, last year, the legislature approved a bill that would prohibit, autonomous trucks, if you've got a gross weight in excess of 10,000 pounds, prohibit from on California roads for testing purposes, prohibit it for transporting goods or transporting passengers if there is not what more and more of these states are referring to as the human safety operator being in the vehicle. That legislation was approved last year at the California State House. It was, in the end, it was vetoed by the governor. But despite that, it was brought back again this year. Same bill sponsor, essentially, 99% of it the same as what they tried to get through last year. And it has essentially picked up from where it left off last year. It has advanced through the State House and continued to make its way forward in hopes that this year Governor Newsom would take a different approach or not stand in the way. But time will tell on that. But nevertheless, California really, it's fair to say, it may be taking the lead on trying to slow down this pursuit of autonomous trucks there on state roadways.
Yeah, and you pointed to the curious thing in California there because Governor Newsom, a Democrat, the State House there, controlled by Democrats. And again, as you mentioned, this was pushed through last year, but the governor still vetoed it. I guess my question, and you probably don't have an answer here, but considering that this bill is largely the same as it was last year, I'm not sure what's going to change that's going to get Governor Newsom to sign it this time around, unless, as you said, he has a change of heart somehow. But it would seem that it would seem that they're trying to do this again, and we're maybe going to get the same result.
Yeah, there's no telling what happens behind closed doors, right?
True, yeah, that's true.
Especially when you're talking about elected officials. It's quite possible that that maybe those who are advocating for this, this is a bipartisan deal in the State House. Yep. The numbers have proved that here now for more than a year. Maybe there is an understanding if it gets to the governor's desk again this year that he would be on board with this. A year ago, the governor pointed to the fact that in California, they have a regulatory process. It authorizes the testing of these vehicles. He didn't feel like they needed to put into statute something that is covered by state regulation. He felt like that was sufficient. The DMV is already responsible for this. They know what they're doing. We don't have to put in this law into statute that, again, he felt was kind of redundant. So we'll see. We'll see if he if he feels that way. Same as he did a year ago. This has advanced from the Senate Transportation Committee. It's going to allow it to come up for consideration on the Senate floor. Again, it's already been approved by the Assembly. So worth pointing out, it was also approved by a veto-proof margin there in the Assembly. And all indications are that it very well will do the same in the California Senate, much like a year ago.
Yeah.
But last year there was no veto override pursuit. So, again, time will tell, as always, in politics.
We shall see. And real quick, we should mention there are a couple of other states that were looking at this issue, did not advance the bill, right? Delaware and New York State. So we're keeping an eye on those maybe for next year, I guess.
Yeah,
this issue.
Both states very similar to California. Delaware got the closest. It was approved there by their Senate. It was headed to the House floor for a vote up against the end of their regular session. That ended again here within the past couple of weeks. It did not get a vote, so that killed it. Maybe they're looking to see what California does. But yeah, Delaware got close this year. New York, not nearly as close, but again, yes, the same type of pursuit along the East Coast.
Moving on, it's an election year, Keith, and even though Election Day is November 5th, primary elections are coming up real quick for truck drivers away from home for extended periods of time. A lot of important dates to keep in mind here, and I'm going to kind of let you run through them. We don't have to get into the weeds here with all the dates, but what do people need to know out there if they want to vote come October and before?
Yeah, of course, primary elections have been going on across the country for a large portion of the year. There are 18 states that have yet to have their primaries. Again, these primaries across the country typically are deciding who's going to be on the fall ballot, whether it's a federal office, a state office, a local office. There are also issues that get included on primary ballots, and often is the case. You can find something on a ballot that there is significance to the trucking industry. So obviously we like to follow that process across the country and notify truck drivers of maybe deadlines that might be coming up, the process of making sure that you're registered to vote. But yeah, July, a slow month for primaries. Arizona is a lone state to have a primary in July. But then it ramps up again once we get to the 1st of August. Tennessee kicks off the month with primaries on August 1st. There will be a total of 13 states with primaries in August. There will be more in September before they're done. But yeah, definitely something. If folks have the opportunity, if they're registered to vote, go ahead and if you're in a state that has not had their primary, there is still time. And if someone has not registered to vote, there is still time. You've got, when you're about 30 days out, or when registration deadlines really start to hit.
Early October.
Yeah, doing it now, can't wait. Got to go ahead and do it now. Worth noting that there are almost half the states have same-day registration in addition to having set deadlines. Like in Illinois, their set deadline for voter registration is about 20 to 30 days out. If you miss that deadline, you can still vote on the same day that you go to the ballot box in Illinois, as well as about 20 other states. So also worth pointing out this year, talking about same-day registration, if somebody misses out on doing it ahead of time. Rhode Island, they offer same-day registration during a presidential election. So that would apply this year if you're in Rhode Island. So anyway, yeah, a lot happening there again with primaries and registration, making sure that you're ready to go. Definitely worth making sure that your voice is heard.
Yeah, and again, there are a ton of ways to do this too. There's advance voting, voting by mail, absentee voting. It's worth checking out for yourself in your home state. I think, A, whether you are registered already, and B, if you're not, you can do that as well. Vote.gov is a great website for that, which you have mentioned in your piece on landline.media, which is also a great place to go to kind of get a rundown of what all the states are doing, how they do it differently, how it may affect you. But again, a lot of information out there. Election day will be here before we know it. But again, keep these things in mind before we get to that point. Very important. Keith Goebel, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you again next week, and we appreciate your time.
Yeah. You have a good one, Scott.
And again, check out his work on landline.media. Just click on the resources tab, or news tab rather, and scroll down to daily news by state. That's our show for today. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.